Couldn't really find myself as an 8-year-old boy because of the fact that outside of the home, I actually suffered some sexual abuse as well.
So was that from a family member or was that from a stranger? What happened with that?
That was actually from two family members. I never wanted to go to the restroom because it reminded me of the abuse.
So how old were you when you first got exposed to drugs?
12 and a half. And the sad thing about it was I had my son with me. I had a cousin and my son with me. He searched me, put me in handcuffs. I had a warrant. So ended up going to jail and actually getting convicted of that. And, my son's older now, so he saw all that. And he came to me one day and he goes, Dad, I don't want to come over anymore. I actually graduated 6 months, but it only took me 2 months to relapse after that. So I did have encounters with Jesus, but I was just never all in.
Have you ever heard the joke that tells of a conversation between a chicken and a pig? The chicken says, "Hey, let's open a restaurant." The pig says, "What would we call it?" The chicken says, "Ham and eggs." The pig says, "No, thank you." The chicken says, "Why not?" The pig says, "While you would be involved, I would be committed." Commitment is difficult, isn't it? Commitment means change, and change is hard. Sometimes I'm not willing to do what it takes to change, but sometimes the consequences of my choices and bad habits demand change. Sometimes change can only happen when I've finally decided to be all in. But what does it look like to be all in? Can change really be permanent and not just temporary? Can God help me change, especially when I can't do it by myself? These are the topics that I want to discuss with our guest today as he shares his life change story with us. Today, our guest is zooming in all the way from Phoenix, Arizona. So, hey, new friend, why don't you introduce yourself and let our listeners know who you are?
Hey, everyone. My name is Joe. I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ.
Well, hey, Joe, glad you're here. Why don't you start off with telling us where you're from and where you were born and raised?
I'm actually born here in the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix, Arizona. But as a child, I moved around a lot.
Do you have a large family or a small family? How many brothers and sisters do you have?
Well, I have two siblings from my mom and my dad, but then I have 5 half brothers and sisters.
Wow, 5 half brothers and sisters. That's a large family. So why don't you give us a little bit of background? Tell us a little bit what it was like growing up in your family of origin. So tell us a little bit about the dynamic of your home.
Well, as a young child, as the memories that I have is, my mom and dad, my 2 brothers. So there was a total of 5 of us. But yeah, it was very difficult because, there was a lot of arguing and fighting. A lot of memories are good, but there was a lot that were bad.
So you mentioned to me offline that your mother and father got divorced. How old were you whenever that happened?
I was 8 years old.
So you were 8 years old. So you have a lot of memories before you were 8 years old, and you mentioned a lot of fighting. Did the fighting ever get physical? Was there ever any physical abuse, or was it mainly just verbal?
It was a lot of verbal.
So tell me a little bit about, so you're 8 years old. So were you a confident little boy? Were you very confident in yourself, or were you, what were you like? What was going on inside of you?
Well, when at that time, I've actually couldn't really find myself as an 8-year-old boy because of the fact that outside of the home, I actually suffered some sexual abuse as well.
Oh, no, I'm so sorry to hear that. So was that from a family member or was that from a stranger? What happened with that?
That was actually from 2 family members, 2 different family members. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what did that do to a little child? Some people blame themselves and some people withdraw within themselves. And what did that do to you and your identity?
Well, looking back on it now, it was normalized. So I thought that was a normal thing to do as a child. But as trying to find my identity, I was kind of lost, kind of broken. I was always sad at that time.
So did your parents, up to 8 years old, did your parents infuse any Christianity or any faith and religion into your home or not?
Strangely enough, my mom is a Christian. Her dad, my grandfather, was a pastor. God bless his soul, for over 60 years. But my dad was a non-traditional, non-active Jehovah Witness.
Wow. Well, how did that go? I mean, that had to be a little bit of a conflict there between the Jehovah Witness and the Christian faith. Did you go to church then or not?
No, no, never went to church. But during the holidays, there was some arguing and debating about what we should do during those holidays, especially around Christmas.
So, were you closer to your dad or your mom growing up?
Um, I think I was a little bit closer to my dad.
Did you guys hang out, go fishing, do any sports or anything together or not?
My dad was a wrestler in high school, so he worked out a lot. And, as a younger child, he tried to, get me to do simple like sit ups and push ups. But I wasn't that guy. I wasn't that kid.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. So divorce is a really big deal, especially to a kid. So did you go with your dad or did you go with your mom? And how did that make you feel after your divorce?
After the divorce, I went with my mom, and I had to change schools. And after that, we just kind of moved around a lot, me and my two brothers. But she ended up having my sister from another marriage, outside the marriage, and then actually had my brother uh, with her new husband. So there was two other siblings after the divorce from her.
Did you have any anger or resentment there whenever you had to go with your mom and you were separated from your dad? I mean, did you get to see your dad a lot after that or not?
Yes. So my dad had visitation rights. It was every other weekend, and I stayed with him during the summer. Usually spend the entire summer with him.
How did that make you going into junior high, middle school, junior high, going into those time frame in your? So you said you had this mix of faith, and so how did that come out in school? Did you make friends that were following the rules, or did you make some friends that maybe weren't following the rules?
Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because I was actually bullied in junior high. I actually moved schools several times, and then finally ended up back at another school where I first started. But because the reason I was bullied was for I would actually have accidents in class. That was one of the main reasons why I had to transfer schools. Um, those accidents were number twos. They just came at random times. One of the reasons now I look back on me having those accidents was because I never wanted to go to the restroom because it reminded me of the abuse.
Oh, so you had some trauma there that you were dealing with as a young boy. So did you ever
Yeah.
get any kind of counseling or anything? I mean, did your mom or your dad know about the abuse?
No, neither one knew about the abuse. And it wasn't until my mom actually heard my testimony the first time that she was kind of questioning what was going on.
Wow, so you kept that a secret.
Yes.
Wow. So did you, whenever you got into middle school and to high school, it sounds to me like you were bullied young. So did that make you withdraw within yourself, or did you seek out community through another group?
I actually isolated myself in junior high, but it wasn't until eighth grade till some of my older cousins would take me out, and we would get high, we would drink, party all weekend. And I actually enjoyed that as a young child. It took me away from my problems.
So how old were you when you first got exposed to drugs?
12 and a half,
12 and a half years
almost
old.
13.
Yeah. And that was through your cousins, you said?
Yeah, some friends of my cousins, and we would go out to parties and drink.
Yeah. Did you keep that a secret as well, or did your mom find out about that?
Drinking was pretty common in the household on my mom's side of the family. So I don't think she ever knew, but I never really drank around my parents.
Yeah. So what happened when you got into high school and you had a little bit more freedom, maybe 16, starting to drive a little bit? Did you continue down that same path of partying, and was that a big part of your life? I mean, tell me a little bit about what was going on in high school for you.
The same guys that bullied me in junior high went to the same high school that I went to. I really thought it was going to be a fresh start, but they went there and I was continued to bullied all the way through my senior year.
So no one else knew about this bullying. I mean, just you and them. I mean, did they grab you after school? Did they get you while you're? I mean, when did they bully you, and how come no one came to your rescue?
Because I was a loner, and I tried to get into groups, like a gang or some type of group to try to find myself, but I never clinged to a group long enough to like really make friends. But yeah, they would catch me in the restroom. They would catch me after school. I mean, it was some pretty bad bullying.
So were they physically bullying you? I mean, did they leave, marks? Did you come home with, bruises and stuff, or was it more just like pushing you around and verbally abusing you?
Pushed me around and some pretty bad verbal abuse. Yeah.
So where did that path lead you? I mean, you're in high school, you're still getting bullied. And did you continue to withdraw within yourself? And did you have any close friends? Did you have any girlfriends or anything, or were you just a loner?
Actually, with my cousins, we had a group of people we hung out with that were my friends at the time, but I never really got to see them a lot because we would only like drink and party on the weekends, and we stayed, friends for a while, but they weren't like really true friends to where they were by my side every step of the way because we all went to different schools. But my kids' mom, I met her when I was 13 years old at one of my cousin's friends' house, and we actually got together. We actually moved in together when I was about 15. She ended up getting pregnant, and I was 17 years old when I delivered my daughter.
So you were 15 when you moved in with your girlfriend. Is that correct?
Correct. We moved in with a family member.
Wow. So how did I mean, again, I'm trying to understand a parent's perspective on that. Did your mom just say, yeah, no problem, go ahead and do that? Or did you just say, I'm doing it no matter what you say? Or
And that goes back to one of your questions about family dysfunction, and that was one thing that I noticed now as an adult was there was no discipline, there was no consequences for our actions.
wow. So you gave birth to your first child when you were 17. Did I hear that right?
Correct. Correct.
17 years old. So what was that like being a father and a teenager? What was that responsibility like? Did you feel like you needed to get married at that point, or did you guys just continue to live together, and did you raise a child together? What happened with all that?
Well, yeah, we never really actually talked about marriage. We just kind of moved in together. Um, we went finally got jobs. I had to drop out of high school. I had to drop out of high school. Technically, I was kicked out of high school, but because by the time I was in my senior year, I only had like 7 credits by my senior year. I went to high school, but I never went to class. So I was kicked out of high school. I was forced to get a job. That was one thing that our parents said is that we had to work. But she continued on going into high school, and she graduated. But I bounced around from job to job, and finally we moved into our own apartment. I think the year was 1999. I think I was 19 years old.
So you stayed together. So you
19.
gave birth. So you started dating this girl or moved in with her when you were 15. 2 years later, had your first child, and that wasn't on purpose, I'm guessing, right?
Correct. It wasn't
Yeah.
on purpose.
So you have a child, you're a father at 17, you go out into the workforce, you don't graduate, and so you're bouncing around from job trying to make ends meet. So how does that now? So, you had a little bit of partying in school, you had a little bit of the, marijuana and maybe some alcohol and so on. Did that continue? After the child came into being, or did you stop doing that for a time?
No, the partying even got harder because now I had more money to spend on drugs and alcohol.
So did you stay with just the marijuana and alcohol, or did you try some harder stuff?
I was actually 15 when I first tried cocaine.
Oh, wow. So would you have classified yourself as an addict as a teenager, or was it one of those things that, you wouldn't have classified your way? I mean, was it more of a social thing, or did you say, I was addicted?
I was addicted when I realized when I was first addicted to drugs and alcohol. Looking back, I was probably in my early 20s when I really came into hardcore drugs.
If you could narrow down your biggest struggle as a young person, and I'm saying before you were an adult, like 20 years old, what was your biggest struggle growing up? If you say, man, this was a thing that I kept coming back to and I just continued to struggle, what would you say that was your biggest struggle?
My biggest struggle was methamphetamine.
Wow. So you started doing meth while you were still a teenager, is that correct?
Yeah, the first time I tried meth, I was about 17 years old.
Wow. How long did you stay with your wife, and did you continue that relationship, or did you guys finally break it off?
She ended up leaving me because I started getting on meth really bad. I wouldn't come home. There was a time where I didn't come home for like 3 days, and I would occasionally do that from time to time. She really, really started questioning it when, she woke me up one morning, and I'm going to do the air quotations, woke me up, which I wasn't. And I had sores all over my face. And, she was asking me what was going on. And I actually went to the doctor. The doctor didn't really know what was going on, but I made up some elaborate story that I had shingles and tried to convince my family that's what it was. But there was a time to where I can look back on my life now, and she confronted me after we moved out of our house and we went to go live with my aunt. She confronted me one day and was, "Are you on drugs? Please tell me that, if you are, just let me know so we can find you help." And I denied it. I looked in her face and lied. And I can look back, and that was a turning point in my life. And I look back and I wish I had the courage to say, yes, I had a problem, but I lied to her and she ended up leaving. And to this day, I don't blame her. Not one bit.
So did she not know that you were using? I mean, you said that you guys kind of partied together some. Was it for her? Was it just alcohol and marijuana, you kept the meth addiction secret, or how did that go?
I was a functional addict at that time. I hid it very well. I hid it very well. Well, no, I didn't hide it very well. I used to think I hid it very well, but she had her suspicions. She really did. And she would ask me questions and arguments would arise. And, it got to that point where we would argue all the time about where I've been, what am I doing? Why does my face look the way it does? And she had her strong suspicions because her parents were addicts. So she knew all the warning signs of that, but she never used with me. She never did anything like that with me.
Did you ever get married, or were you guys still just living
No, we
together?
never got married.
Okay, so how
No, we
old
never
were
got married.
you whenever you had that conversation and she asked you if you're using and you said, no, I'm not?
I do believe I was 25.
So that would mean that your firstborn was around 8 years old. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So, and was it a boy? Was it your son?
I had a girl and a boy.
Which one was your firstborn?
My daughter. My daughter.
So did your daughter recognize anything that was going on? How was your relationship with her?
I love my kids. I love them. Apparently not enough, and I recognize that now to try to keep my home safe. But I was very close to my kids. I was very active with them and try to be there as much as possible because I believed that all I had to do was be present, be there. That was like the bar, the standard, just be there. But now I look back and that wasn't even like close enough to like actually show my kids the real love that they deserve.
So you had two kids through her. I mean, did she get custody of the kids? Did your drug addiction come out in court? I mean, how'd that work?
She did mention it in court, but neither one of us had lawyers. I actually ended up getting joint custody,
Oh,
surprisingly.
so that's an emotional time as well. So did you dive deeper into the meth addiction and all of that after she left, or did you try to get some help?
Oh, absolutely. I went off and running. I looked at it as an opportunity to just make more of a mess of my life. I really did look at that as an opportunity to just be free and do whatever it is that I really wanted to do at any time without anybody, nagging me or any responsibility. So I went really deep into the addiction.
So where did that newfound freedom, and I'm using air quotes now, where did that newfound freedom lead you?
It led me to hang around some really, really bad people. I started living in that world. And at that point, I did have family members who actually used meth as well. So we became a tighter niche because I was always around. We were always grouped together. So one of us always had some type of drug to use. So I was always with this group of family members.
Did you ever get in trouble with the law? I mean, did you ever get caught with that stuff?
I actually got pulled over about a month after I first started really using meth. Like it became an everyday thing. I got pulled over. They searched my car. And the sad thing about it was I had my son with me. I had a cousin and my son with me. He searched me, put me in handcuffs. I had a warrant. So ended up going to jail and actually getting convicted of that.
How old was your son when that happened?
I do believe he was about 5.
So did you spend any jail time then, or did you get off, and what was where did that lead you?
Yeah, so I ended up doing a couple of days in jail, got released, was put on probation, but like everything else in my life, I just didn't put in any effort or not care enough to even do anything about it. And I just kind of let that go.
So was this after your girlfriend left and you were separated, and you
Yeah.
just had your, okay, so it was. So, we talk about in recovery reaching a low, and we tend to just go until finally we've reached the bottom. Where was the bottom for you?
The bottom was in 2016. I've actually was on my third relationship. I had actually had met someone else. I was still in my addiction. Met someone else. We were together for like 5 years. She had 3 kids, which was a great family that I had, but still I didn't understand the concept of what a great father looks like. When I started trying to attempt to go to church and back and forth, I would have months of sobriety and then I'll use again and then back and forth. But in 2016, on my third relationship, long-term relationship, my daughter didn't really have anything to do with me. She was already a teenager at that time. My son was a freshman in high school, and um, my girlfriend, we were living together, and she just didn't really want to be with me anymore because I was once again always gone, and never came home. And my son's older now, so he saw all that, and he came to me one day and he goes, "Dad, I don't want to come over anymore." And we still had joint custody, so I would actually have my son and my daughter for a week. But my daughter didn't really live with me for years before that because she saw what was going on, and she just kind of came on visitations every now and then, to where like I hardly ever saw her. But my son was, "Hey, I don't want to come over anymore," and that was my rock bottom because I was full blown in my addiction, using every day, all day, and it broke me.
Yeah. Did you have a job at that point? I mean, how did you work if you're always high?
I bounced around from job to job until like I couldn't, work anymore. Till I used, my, sick time because I couldn't come in, or started racking up occurrences, and they'll end up letting me go. And majority of the time I was on When I didn't have a job, I was on food stamps. I was on unemployment. So those were sources of income. And I thought that was enough for my family at the time. But no, it wasn't.
So you mentioned going to church a little bit. How old are you whenever your son made that statement that I don't want to come over anymore?
I believe I was 36, 37.
So you're now, in your 30s and your kids are teenagers. They're old enough to remember all this stuff and experience all this stuff. And your son says, Dad, I don't want to come over anymore. And so you said that that's your bottom. So where did you turn? I mean, what happened?
Well, with my kids' mom, she was going to church, and I would go with her. My second long-term relationship, we lived across the street from a church, so we would go. She would go more often than I would. And with my third relation at the time, we started going. About 2015, we went to a church for Easter service, and then that became a regular thing for me, going every other week. And that's where I believe I saw the battle happening spiritually, because I felt like there was something there. I felt like there was something that I was being called to. I just didn't know what it was. I actually tried to attend some AA meetings. I went to Celebrate Recovery. I tried to battle throughout the years. I even went to the Salvation Army for 6 months, at the recovery rehab facility. And I actually, the only thing that I can look back in my life, I actually graduated 6 months, but it only took me 2 months to relapse after that. So I did have encounters with Jesus, but I was just never all in. And the day I got sober was July 17th, 2016. I hit my knees and I said, God, I know you're there. I know you're real. I'm all in. I'm all in. I can't keep living like this.
So did that happen right after your son told you that he didn't want to come over anymore, or what was the time frame there?
Yeah, it was probably about a couple of days, 2 to 3 days after that he had told me that. And me and my girlfriend, we were arguing all the time, I didn't want to live that life anymore.
So where did you go? Where did you seek help from?
Well, my first instinct was to go back to Celebrate Recovery, because I believe that was something I needed. It was structured. There was, people who wouldn't judge me, and I felt safe. So I started attending. It took about a couple of weeks for me to come to realization, and get that mind just somewhat focused to get out of bed, because I fell into a full blown depression. So it took a couple of weeks for me to go to Celebrate Recovery, and then from there I just started going back to church every weekend. I started opening up my Bible, started to press in, because I was really wholeheartedly all in.
Well, that's awesome that you became all in. We say at Celebrate Recovery, it works if you work it, and it won't if you don't. It sounds like the first time you went, you didn't really work it, but it sounded like you were actually working it this time.
Correct.
So that was in 2016. So are you 8 years sober?
I'm gonna be. Yeah, absolutely. Looking
Man,
forward to it.
man, praise God. That is
Amen.
awesome. So what was whenever you went through, I'm making an assumption that you went through a step study, you started working this program, and you're sober for first time in a really long time. So what was some of the most meaningful things that you learned in that first step study?
One of the first lessons that I learned, of course, in sober recovery is denial. And through those first steps, I realized that in my entire life, I was living in denial.
That's the first step, is stepping out of denial and everything. So now, principle 3 says consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Did you ever make that commitment to Jesus Christ? Did you do that at Celebrate Recovery, or when did that happen?
I want to say the real commitment was in 2016, because, like I said, throughout my time, I was introduced to Christ. But that's all it really was like introductions from here, from there. And I can look back and say, yeah, Jesus was standing in front of me at these certain points in my life. But I wasn't all in with him. And in 2016, I really welcomed him into my heart, into my life, and allowed him to take control of everything. My spirit, my life, my finances, my relationships, and I mean everything I gave to him.
Wow, that's amazing. So did you repair some of the damage that was done with your kids?
Yes, I did. It took quite a few years, to repair some of the damage that I did, because my kids were very, very skeptical about my sobriety, because they've heard it before, with a couple of rehabs, and seeing me high. And I would always say, I'll get help. I'll get help. And when I did, it didn't last very long. So they heard that song and dance before. So it took them quite a few years for them to be like, well, okay, something's for real here. Something's happening.
So how's your relationship today with your children?
I get teary eyed when I hear that, because when I got sober, 6 months after I got sober, I started serving for high school ministry. And one of the reasons why I chose to do that, because high school is where it really fell for me. And I thought that I could teach teenagers, like, hey, high school is a pivotal point in your life. You can, make something of yourself, or you can head the wrong direction. And I felt that wholeheartedly, to teach these young men, like, hey, there's decisions we have to make in high school. And when they saw that I continually, week after week, driving towards Christ and leading people to Christ, they saw something different. And today our relationships are amazing. I took my son to high school camps. He attended high school services with me, and both have been baptized. I actually had the honor and privilege and blessing to actually baptize my daughter.
Wow.
And I actually got the honor and privilege to baptize my stepdaughter with my new marriage. I baptized her as well. I baptized several other students, and my daughter now serves in special needs ministry. And their mom is a follower of Christ, a full-blown follower of Christ, and she is serving in a daycare. And my wife is now in high school ministry, and with kids as well. So we are surrounded with love from Christ. And I worked very hard to regain that respect and love from them, and they know that they can count on me today. And we always hang out, we always talk. And my kids' mom invited me and my wife to my granddaughter's birthday last week, and it was amazing to see my kids' mom like invite me to something so big that she had planned. And she's all over the couple of years. She's allowed me and welcomed me into her home, but nothing to where, it's, simple conversation, nothing, extraordinary. But now I can see the change in her, and looking at me, and, I know it's taken this long, but to see her look at me and like, okay, I get it now. I see the change in you now. And that's a huge blessing to have peace with my kids' mom.
Amen, brother. Well, it sounds like you've made quite a journey. So let me ask you this question. So you had some sexual abuse as a child. How has your recovery changed your perspective on that? And how have you dealt with that?
I get that question a lot, because I'm very open about what had happened. And I can say I've fully forgiven those who have harmed me, because I can't ask for forgiveness for the things that I've done. And I've done some horrible things. If I can't forgive others, and I can't forgive myself, so how can we stand and look in the mirror and be like, God, forgive me for the horrible things, but curse these people? I've fully forgiven them. And it was through the Celebrate Recovery program that I learned to put down on paper what I felt, what I was going through, some of the memories, and be open and honest with myself about the trauma that I went through. And everyone that was on that list, I have fully forgiven, and I am free of that anger, free of that depression from those times. I mean, it is a true honor and a blessing to know that God is working behind the scenes.
Amen. If you want to give one message to the listeners, and maybe there's a listener that's exploring the opportunity for recovery. Maybe they've realized that there is a problem, but what's the first step? What can they do? And what's your message to them?
Be honest. For the first time, maybe be honest with yourself about what you are doing, where you are at, and recognize who you are. And when we do that, we understand what God's purpose is for our life. Being lost, being confused, it's hard to live that way. So be honest about where you are now and understand that God will help you find a way to get out of whatever bottom you are in, whatever darkness you're living in, because he always has a way out for you.
Joe, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. Hey, if you are listening today and maybe you've tried to change on your own and now you are about to give up, don't give up. Give in to Jesus Christ and go all in with him. Maybe it's time to be honest with yourself and admit that you need a higher power to change. Change is possible as I surrender to Jesus Christ. Maybe it's time for you to go all in, just like Joe did. However, if nothing changes, nothing changes. See you next time. Hey, if you are still listening and you like this podcast, I want to encourage you to listen to previous episodes because they will help to inspire change in your life. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a positive review because it helps to bring this podcast to others. But no matter what, may God bless you and may God bring positive change to your life.